in a function, in a stored procedure, you have written this. Then will it return all the records or not? It depends on whether there are records or not. If there are no records, it will not return anything. You know, if there are not records, will it return null? It will not return null. It will not return any another thing, will not return any another thing, right? So that is very important to understand. 1 second. Okay. So technically, what is a stored procedure? Stored procedure means it will have the behavior of both functions and methods. It will have the behavior of both functions and methods. So actually the point about the function and method is nothing but, so functions always return a value and methods will not return a value. And procedures may or may not return the value. They will change the behavior according to the situation, according to the situation. So that is what actually the point about procedure, right? Technically, a procedure, that's the reason your databases call them as procedures, not as function, because so they will return a value if the situation has the value to return. Otherwise, they will not return any value. Will not return any value. That is the basic thing you need to understand. So the point is in TypeScript, actually, in TypeScript and JavaScript or TypeScript comprises of only JavaScript or TypeScript comprises of only functions. And functions have the behavior. That means functions have the behavior of a procedure here. That means in TypeScript they have only functions, but these functions are different from the general functions in programming. They have the behavior of procedure. That means they are responsible for returning a value as per the situation, and may not return the value depending on the situation, may or may not return the value. They have the behavior of a procedure. So JavaScript or TypeScript will not have any methods, so will not have any procedures. They will have only functions, but functions have the behavior of procedure. So in JavaScript and TypeScript, you should regularly talk about functions, not methods. So that means it is good for us to tell here that so a particular class in TypeScript, we don't care about other languages. A class in TypeScript comprises of 3 members. A class in TypeScript comprises of 3 members. So the properties, the methods, now here instead of methods, you should say functions, and constructor. Properties are used to store the data. Methods are used to define a functionality. So we should call it as a function. Functions are used to define a functionality or logic, right? And what is difference between property and variable? What is difference between function and a method and a procedure? And in JavaScript or TypeScript, what we should call them? That is important to us. So we need to handle here all about functions. So technically, class comprises of these three things. So syntactically, we have a class and a class name, and inside the class we will have a constructor, and we will have functions, and we will have so the properties. So the properties, constructors, functions, these are the three major members in a class. And they can have the accessibility like static or non-static memory. They have the accessibility by using access specifiers like public, private, protected, and all these options are important. Okay, let's see how we can handle these members. Detailedly, we will see how do we work with these members. So the first important we need to understand about, technically we need to understand about, so constructor in a TypeScript class. So in the class members, we need to first discuss about what is a constructor, and technically what is the purpose of the constructor, and how we can define a constructor. Usually, if we ask what is the purpose of a constructor, then as a programmer, the first answer will be, majority of you will talk about initializing of values. Constructor are used for initializing of values. Am I right? So many of you have a answer. Technically, what do you think? What is the purpose of a constructor? When I talk about constructor, so many of you tell the same point. You will say that constructor is used for initializing the values. Am I right? Majority of people have the same answer. Constructor is used for initializing the values. Constructor can create an instance of class. So why we need to create an instance of class? Without instance of class also we can access the member now. That means static. We can use static also, right? So without instance of the class we can access. Yes. Constructor, when it is called, that is not the point. I'm asking what it is. Generally, what is the purpose of constructor? So many people, because we as programmers have mismatched so many topics, so many things in a development process actually. So what the exact point is, many people miss that, and general use terms are regularly used, which are actually not correct, because traditionally from several days developers are following few approaches, few points in such a way that architecturally that is not good to say, but our developers are following in a similar method many times. But technically, architecturally, what is the point? Actually, if anybody says constructor is used to initialize value, what we are doing, public some x, what is this called as? We call this as declaration.